Hi, I'm Saida Garrett, co-writer of Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror, and you're listening to Rainbow Country with Mr. Mark Tara.
The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the persons appearing on the program.
Link and his younger brother Travis run away from home, leaving behind their abusive father and embark on a journey where Link will discover his sexuality and rediscover his Mi'kmaq heritage. The movie is Wildhood. Today on Rainbow Country, my TIFF 2021 coverage begins with an in-depth interview on queer two-spirit filmmaker Brett Hannam, director, writer, and producer of the new Canadian film, Wildhood. That and so much more on episode 267, so stay tuned for Gay Talk Radio right here on Rainbow Country.
Hi, this is Carol Pope.
Hi, I'm Garrett Conley, author of Boy Erased, a memoir.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Segato.
Hi, I'm Gord Depp of the Spoons. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Well, hello and welcome to a brand new journey through Rainbow Country. As I like to call it, a little gay radio show working to give voice to the LGBT community and beyond. And as always, I am your tour guide through Rainbow Country. I'm producer and host, Mark Tara. By the way, Rainbow Country originates from CIUT-FM in Toronto, the sound of your city, and now proudly in syndication on 10 outlets across Canada. So from the Yukon to the prairies to the east coast of Canada in the Maritimes to Ontario, even down to Buffalo, New York, and online. Thanks to you tuning in, streaming, downloading, but ultimately listening. Together we continue to build Rainbow Country into a nationally syndicated gay radio show, a #1 LGBT podcast, and a top 100 LGBT podcast to follow. So today, my TIFF 2021 coverage begins with an in-depth interview on Brett Hannam, a queer two-spirit filmmaker and the writer, producer, and director of the new Canadian feature, Wildhood. We'll find out about the making of this new LGBT film, what it means to him to be two-spirit, and more. Plus, music from LGBT artists, independent artists, voices that we've come to know and love in classic disco, classic 80s, classic house. And on this episode, I'll be featuring some new wave, some 80s, as well as a spotlight on some Canadian Indigenous artists. But up first, Rainbow Country contributor, activist, historian, and author Tim McCaskell talks about the early days of the AIDS epidemic.
At first, we didn't believe it. I was doing the international news for the Body Politic when I read a report in an American paper about a strange new cancer that was apparently affecting gay men. More sensationalized media homophobia, I thought. It didn't turn out that way. Some Body Politic collective members were back and forth to New York and soon reported that something serious was indeed going on. Guys who had seemed quite healthy months before were suddenly dying. Nobody knew what was happening, so everybody got to project their own prejudices on the blank slate of AIDS. If you were an environmentalist, it was obviously big city pollution. If you didn't like poppers, it was caused by poppers. If you didn't like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, it was too much sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Maybe it was all that sperm up our bums. If you were a fundamentalist Christian, it was obviously God's punishment, the wages of sin is death, and so on and so on. What we did know was that somehow it was connected to sex. That was bad news for those of us in the business of sexual liberation. We saw a whole community based on sexual networks potentially falling apart. We feared everything we'd built up over a decade was about to be destroyed, not to mention that we were all going to die. New York and San Francisco were already in a panic. Larry Kramer was screaming that we were fucking ourselves to death. Baths and sex clubs across the U.S. were being closed down. There were no effective medicines. If you had it, it was just a matter of time before you died. The government was doing fuck all, so we had to figure this out for ourselves. In 1983, the community came together to form the AIDS Committee of Toronto and began to organize care teams and support groups. Then HIV was identified. For the first time, we knew this was a blood-borne virus that could be sexually transmitted. ACT took on prevention campaigns. What squared the circle of sexual liberation versus a deadly sexually transmitted disease was safe sex. Condoms came to our rescue. We could still have sex, just had to use a rubber. AIDS in Toronto was born in the shadow of the bath raids, remember? We had just moved heaven and earth to defend these places. We weren't about to let them close down now. So while baths and clubs were being shuttered south of the border, ACT demanded there be no such closures in Toronto. Baths here remained open and became sites of outreach and education, and they're still open today. For Rainbow Country, this is Tim McCaskell, a gay liberation dinosaur from another planet and author of Queer Progress.
Bill 7, to ban discrimination in employment, government services, and housing, based on a person's sexual orientation, was up for a vote at Queen's Park. Most NDP and Liberal MPPs supported the bill, but without some progressive Conservative legislators backing, a divisive split could rack the province. 4 PCs decided to break party ranks to vote with their conscience and support Bill 7. Cabinet Minister and MPP Dennis Timbrell did it to show solidarity for his beloved brother, the well-known drag queen Rusty Ryan. And for me, a gay politician who was not yet out, I had to take a stand. We were known as the Gang of Four. I'm former Cabinet Minister and MPP Phil Gillies. The date, December 2nd, 1986, when LGBT rights came to Ontario.
My name is Charles Officer, and I'm the writer and director of Invisible Essence, The Little Prince. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Up next, writer, producer, director, filmmaker, Brett Hannam. Brett Hannam, hi, how are you?
I'm doing well, how are you?
I am good. Thank you for being here to have your voice, your story be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you for that, especially when it comes to your new movie, 2021's Wildhood. Let's just jump right in. I believe you wrote, produced, directed this new film in conjunction with others. What is the story that you're telling in Wildhood? Talk to me about this story.
Sure. The story is about a young person who he grows up with his father, and he's been led to believe that his mother, who is Mi'kmaq, is dead. And he doesn't really fit into the trailer park. His dad doesn't really like him. He kind of is tolerated. And his only friend is kind of like his younger half brother. So he doesn't really fit into this trailer park setting very well, for various different reasons, and finds out one day that his mother is alive, in fact, and he decides that he's going to take his younger brother with him and go on a journey to find her. And on the way, they meet another young young fellow who is a two-spirit Mi'kmaq fancy dancer. And together they travel along the back roads and in search of the mother, and they kind of form this little found family unit and go on a trip.
Go on an epic journey of self-discovery, maybe even.
No big deal.
The first 8 minutes or so of this film is powerful. It's engaging. It's a little shocking. Was that always the intent, the opening of this film, that the way that it is? Was that something that was set off at the get-go, or did that evolve over time?
That part didn't change very much from the inception of the story, which was like 10 years ago. So that's saying something, I guess. If anything, we actually toned it down a lot.
Wow, you toned that down. Okay.
Yes, that got toned down. It's a little too much. But now it's just right. It's a little bit shocking, but not overwhelming, I hope.
Yeah. No, it's well done. The use of music, pop songs, the score, very effective. Is that important for you? Is that something that you look for in regards to setting the tone and the mood of a certain scene by using pop songs in particular?
Yeah, I mean, music has the potential to change the entire feel and tone of a scene. So, we were dropping all these different songs into place throughout different parts in the movie, seeing how it changed the vibe or how it changes the feel of the characters in the scene, or even how it changes the dynamic of the scene within the context of the greater story as a whole. So that's something that we're super mindful of. And for me, the way I consume music is if I hear something and I like it, I save it. I don't really have a great retention for the names of songs. So often I'll be like, oh, I know exactly what should go here, but I have no idea how to express it. Besides finding the song and playing it for people. So having other people who are much more versed in that kind of thing helped me a lot. I'd be like, it's kind of like this song. And they're like, here's 5 different other songs.
Mm. This story that you're telling, how did you say that it took 10 years to bring this story to the screen?
Yeah, the first draft I wrote, I think, was 2010 or 2011. And at the time, the feedback that I got was that people liked the story, but a lot of it came with changes that I wasn't willing to do.
And where were those changes? Like, who was asking you to make those changes?
They would have been just people that were mentoring me or that I respected or had more work than me, or not work than me, but like had more of a body of work than I did. Right? People that I looked up to, I want to get feedback from, because I was just starting out. And so a lot of the feedback was, the scenes are solid, the writing is fairly solid, but I mean, there's always room for improvement, but, that you'd find it easier to get funding if they weren't gay, or if they were, then if they were both women, or if, can one of them can be a woman, one of them be a guy, so can they be straight, or it'd be better if this one's not Indigenous, and so on and so on. And unfortunately, that's not new type of feedback.
How did you feel when you were getting that specific feedback?
Oh, yeah, I've gotten that for so many things that I've done, that at this point, I'm just kind of like, whatever, thanks, bye. But I mean, it's something that's always kind of like, it makes you feel shitty. Because, the question is always like, well, why do they have to be gay? It's not important to the story in any way. That's kind of, that used to be at least the way that it would be worded or used. And so to justify they should be straight, these characters. And then my retort is always, well, why do they have to be straight? Why do characters in other movies have to
exactly
be yeah. So things have thankfully in the past 10 years changed quite a bit for queer representation, two-spirit representation. And we still have a long way to go, a lot of work to do, but things are opening up now. It's more of a blooming flower than a very angry clam that you got to pry open with a pry bar.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a pink studded little crowbar there.
Yes.
So you said you wrote the first draft maybe around 10 years ago. When did you guys film?
We filmed last year, actually.
In 2020?
In 2020.
During the pandemic?
During the pandemic in the summer. Outside.
And where did you film?
We filmed in Nova Scotia, in rural Nova Scotia, towards the Annapolis Valley, in Indianapolis Valley.
And that's where you're based, correct?
Yes, that's where I'm based. I'm at the other end of the valley, but this is where I am.
So how was it filming during a global pandemic then?
Challenging. It's one of those things where you are moving forward, and we were able to move forward. My producers were working their butts off to make sure everything was lining up. We had to compromise certain things in some ways, like that when the actors came in, they had to quarantine for 2 weeks. So all of the rehearsals were over Zoom, which is very odd. And I wasn't a huge fan of that, but it was one of those things where this can happen and it's the best we can do to keep moving forward. So we did make the most of it, and it did work out quite well. But it's just posed challenges through the whole way. Thankfully, since our film is mostly outdoors, which is not something you often hear because weather is so cruel, because it was outdoors, it was a bit easier to convince the powers that be that we could adhere to these COVID protocols.
Are you content with the final version of the film?
I mean, it's okay. No. Yes, I'm very happy with how it turned out. There's a lot of collaboration with community. In particular, the Wabanagi Two-Spirit Alliance that's based over in the East Coast in traditional Mi'kmaq territory. So they were providing language and cultural support and context. And, we even had one of the co-founders in the film.
So the three main characters in the film, there's Link, there's Travis, his younger brother, and then there's Pasme, who's the person that they kind of like join along the way on their journey. How was it to find these particular actors to create that chemistry that you do capture on screen?
Sure. Is Buzzamai, that it's an odd, the pronunciation and spelling are different.
Okay.
But for them, we had cast, we had done a short film before we did the feature. And we had found Avery Winters Anthony, who plays Travis. When he was like 10, we had gone into a Muay Thai place. And we were talking to the guy that runs it, who is a good friend, a solid guy. And he was like, well, are you guys looking for like all these stunts and stuff? And I was like, no, we're just kind of like looking for actors. And he's like, that's that kid over there, and you want to talk to him, and he's practicing with his dad. So we went over, and We got him to audition, and he was great. So we carried him over into the feature because it was just a natural fit. The other characters from the short, we kind of worked with them to bring them over into the feature, but there's a lot they hadn't done any acting really before the short film. So we did make roles for them. We kept them in the film. They show up towards the end. But the other our leads in the feature, we kept them, or we kept looking for them across all across Turtle Island. We put out kind of casting calls, and we were doing things over Zoom where they're sending audition tapes and doing Zoom auditions. And it just so happened that there were these two really good actors, and that's always great when you find that, but then how will they play together? Like, what is the chemistry between them? You watch some films, especially some films with queer subject matter, and you can tell people are not comfortable with each other. And that's just because some people are not comfortable with each other. So we were lucky enough that they were close enough together at one point that they could physically go into a space and they could be together on a Zoom. And so we were kind of like doing a chemistry test over Zoom. And we did that with them, and seeing them together, it was like, okay, no, these guys are our guys. They're our leads.
So did Wildhood start out as a short then?
We had the feature script and then made a short film based on it, to cast and to figure out like our creative approach to the story, like how we're going to use the camera, what shot language, and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of that informed or carried over into the feature.
So there was recently an article in Variety announcing that Wildhood was recently acquired by Berlin-based film distributor Films Boutique. Congrats on that.
Thank you.
First of all, what does that mean, having your film being acquired by a distributor, for, somebody that's not familiar with these terms and with the workings of the film industry? What does it mean for your film to have been picked up?
Well, they're a sales company, I believe. I'll give you full disclosure, and this is also an area that I don't know a ton about.
Me neither.
Usually my films, I put them on the internet. That's all.
But does this mean that general audiences will be able to see the film either on a streaming service or in theaters at some point?
I hope so. What it means, what I think it means, and anyone that's listening that knows more can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the company, the Film Boutique, helps to find the distributor, right? And the streaming service, and set up all of those things. They facilitate those things. So it means that we have someone that's on our team that's helping us position things and approach people, so people will be able to watch it, hopefully in theaters and on a streaming service eventually. Right now it's going to be at film festivals for another while. And then after that, it's kind of like, who knows whatever happens, but fingers crossed that it comes to theaters, and we still have theaters.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, have you heard of a service called Reverie?
Yes, I have heard of Reverie.
Based in LA or California, I guess. It's a 24-hour streaming LGBT channel.
Yes.
And it's great. I recently discovered it, and anyone that's making queer content in regards to film or TV or whatever, I'm like, check out Reverie.
Yeah, one of my friends actually has a short film on Reverie. That's kind of how I became aware of them. But yeah, they have a ton of short films and shows and stuff on there.
Yeah. There was a film called Flood, short film, that was part of TIFF, their short program, a couple years ago. And that's on Reverie.
Oh, nice.
So speaking of Reverie, let's talk about Maze Walker Films, founded in 2013, I believe. This is your production company?
Yeah.
What prompted you to start Maze Walker Films? How did this production house come about?
Well, it mainly came about because it's hard to find a producer. And I wanted to develop my own work before I approached producers. And one way that you can do that is to produce your own work, at least to a point. There's a lot of other stuff involved, but more or less it just becomes kind of like the springboard from where I launch all of my ideas off of. So sometimes that's through a more official capacity. Sometimes that's through community, working with community and doing film and videography stuff. And then other times it's making short films.
And how has it been on this journey, this Maze Walker journey for you? Has it been a huge learning experience, I'm sure? Has it been challenging, I'm sure?
Yes, there's a lot. I mean, anyone that is running their own business will tell you that the first thing that you should do is run away and change your mind. But it is very challenging. And it's challenging to make a boundary between, when the work stops and when your personal life begins. Often they bleed over and into each other. And with film work, it can be extra challenging to be able to, engage the different structures and systems and funding systems that are in place, and make sure that you are responsible for the development of the ideas, the quality of the ideas and the material that's coming out, how they are shared with the people around you. And for me, how you are engaging with community and following protocols, and being respectful, and not just the Indigenous community, but for the queer community as well. So there's a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of roles. And I am a company of one person plus a dog. And he's basically useless.
But I'm sure he gives you emotional support. That's
what they say, but I mean, if they mean he sleeps on my feet, he's doing it right now. So
that's emotional support, isn't it? What kind of dog is he?
He's a husky.
Oh my God, I love those. Does he howl?
He does howl, yes.
Oh, that's so great.
He will do it randomly when you're sitting by him on the couch and you're like, what's going on? What dream did you have?
And on that note, we will return after this Rainbow Country update.
I'm Billy Newton Davis, and we're sitting here on Rainbow Country with the fabulous Mark Tara.
So the Toronto International Film Festival is in full swing. And for the second time in the festival's history, Canada can attend. A silver lining to a global pandemic, I say. Launched in 1976 as the Festival of Festivals, in 1978, the name changed to the Toronto International Film Festival, and in 2009 was rebranded TIFF. Time magazine once called TIFF the most influential film festival, period, as a result of the festival's ability to generate Oscar buzz. The festival's People's Choice Award, which is based on audience voting, has become a gauge for success during award season, especially the Academy Awards. Past recipients of the TIFF People's Choice Award include Oscar-winning films like Life is Beautiful, American Beauty, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Slumdog Millionaire, The King's Speech, 12 Years a Slave, La La Land, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, Green Book, and Jojo Rabbit. Here is something to look out for. The 3rd annual TIFF Tribute Awards, which honors the film industry's outstanding contributors and their achievements, will air on CTV Saturday, September 18th at 7 p.m. Eastern. 2021's TIFF honorees include Benedict Cumberbatch, Jessica Chastain, Denis Villeneuve, and Dionne Warwick. The 3rd annual TIFF Tribute Awards airs on CTV Saturday, September 18th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Now back to my one-on-one with filmmaker Brett Hannam.
Hi, I'm Garrett Conley, author of Boy Erased, a memoir. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
So you are an award-winning filmmaker. Your films have been featured at the Vancouver International Film Festival, Imagine Native, Inside Out Film Festival, TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, just to name a few. How did you get into films and filmmaking in the first place? How did this journey start for you?
Completely by accident. No, not completely by accident. That's a lie. I've always been into art, drawing and painting, and when I was little, just making up stories. And I watched a lot of movies, but it never really occurred to me that people make movies. They just come from somewhere. And then when I was a bit older, as a teenager, I was like, well, people make movies, but they make movies in Hollywood. They don't make them here. And then my art teacher at the time actually was like, I want you to watch this movie. Watch this movie. It was made by someone here. And I was like, that's crazy. So I watched this movie. It was called The Hanging Garden. It's by Tom Fitzgerald, who is based in Halifax. And it's a great movie, and I remember my head exploding. And I was like, people made this movie and they made it here, and that was a revelation. So when I went to study school, I went and studied animation for a little while up in Halifax. And one of the things we studied or looked at was film and video. So we had a little bit. I got a kind of an idea for what it was. I started writing scripts. But then I went to NASCAD art school, and I studied drawing and painting and all these other things. And then one day someone was like, the class you want is not open and you need to fill these requirements. You should take film. You have a background in film. So I did, and then I just filled all of my courses with film courses.
sketch out your scenes?
I do. Yeah, I'll do storyboards.
And do you draw those out by hand?
I do. I use an iPad to do my sketches on now. Usually, sometimes I might quickly sketch something in my notebook that I always carry with me.
You and Ridley Scott.
Yeah. It's a bit of a pain, but I find it a more tactile and immediate than an iPad sometimes. And it's different to be drawing with a pencil. But it's definitely a skill that has helped me. I mean, I know I have friends that do the same and they just draw stick figures. As long as you're communicating, then it works.
Mm-hmm.
I just turn mine into comics.
Do you really?
Yeah, I get bored and then I'll turn it into, like, after it's done, I'll turn it into a little comic or whatever that I never ever show people.
Is there a Wildhood comic then?
There isn't exactly, because I didn't storyboard this one. I only did one or two scenes. I did the intimate scene. I had to figure out how that was going to work. I did the end scene, the final scene, and I did some of the more action-oriented scenes to figure out what approaches we were going to come from. But then the rest of it was more organic and letting it unfold and working with the actors in the space and seeing what it gave us.
So you just mentioned the intimate scene. How was that, filming that with the actors and the process? Talk to me about that. Was it challenging? Was it difficult? Was it easy?
It wasn't easy. I would say it was challenging. Mm-hmm. It always is. It's
did you know who was okay? Here's my question, because when I saw this film, I was like, okay, that's how that's going to happen? Because I would have thought it would have been the other way around. But how did you decide essentially who was going to be against the rocks, so to speak?
That was
facing
planned.
The rocks. Facing the rocks.
That was planned. That was planned from early on. And what it came down to was a lot of work with character and backstory, and who was the more experienced of the two that would be guiding the scene, that would be more in charge of like making sure things were happening or unfolding the way they should, and that everyone was okay and down with everything. The way we did it in two different parts, because the water was a little chilly too. That's always a challenge, and it's a little treacherous being up on those rocks, right? They're quite wet. But we filmed. I think we didn't do many takes. They were totally in the scene. They totally understood it. I didn't give much direction at all. But that's a testament to the work that they put into it.
So, Brett, you are part of the LGBT community. You are Two-Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
For myself, for the listeners, how do you see being Two-Spirit? Can you describe this to us?
Sure. Yes. It's a term. It's a more of a pan-Indigenous term, Two-Spirit, and it's kind of a younger term. It's been around since the 90s, and it's kind of a stepping stone that's in place because of colonization. So different nations, different communities have their own words or word for Two-Spirit. And different individuals have different interpretations anyway. So, but mine is, it's an identity that encompasses not only gender and sexual identity, but it also extends to relationship with the land, the animals, language, culture, and the community around you. So it's kind of more, when we talk about it, we all often say it's more of a circle, that it's a cycle. Things move and are flowing and changing, and being, and they are alive. It's a multifaceted identity, as opposed to just a label for your sexuality or just a label for your gender.
Mm-hmm. It's all encompassing then.
Yeah. And, there's emotional side to it, a spiritual side to it. It's not kind of something that I would say people just pick up one day and say, I am this, I'm going to be this, right? There's a lot it's part of a lot of things that it takes time to understand, and for each person to be walking their own path as well, to interpret it in their way. And that's what makes it dynamic, is because there's no one way. All these different interpretations and ways of being kind of come together, and there's room for all of those things. Whereas opposed to maybe a more Western or colonial idea of gender or sexuality is a bit more rigid. It's a binary-based system that's slowly changing, but even the label non-binary is based in a binary. So it's kind of a trap. But
was this a conscious choice for you to say that I am Two-Spirit?
Yes. Well, yeah. It's something that it's not something I randomly decided. Something kind of, or I knew. It's something kind of I knew as a young person and didn't really have words or language for. And then as I got older and was a teenager, I think it was like 17 the first time I saw this term, Two-Spirit, and I didn't really understand it because it was in a more academic type of book, and it was written by a non-Indigenous person, so it was very borderline offensive in some of the ways that it's described. But then speaking to community and speaking to knowledge keepers, to elders, to other people that were Two-Spirit, that have that identity, it's a slow opening up and understanding of yourself and the world around you and where you fit in and how you fit in. But it also means taking on roles and responsibilities as well. It's not like a one day you are and one day you aren't type thing. Not that there are that to diminish identities that are like that. Certainly, I think people should be exploring and fluid and move accordingly through their own paths.
So gender-wise, you go by, your pronouns are they, them.
Mm-hmm. I use, they or them. I get, he and him a lot because that's what people assume. I get she and her usually only when I'm speaking with someone whose first language is Mi'kmaq, because there's no genders really in the language. So a lot of people, for whatever reason, will say her instead of him a lot, like or her or she, because it doesn't matter. The word in Mi'kmaq is negam, which just means like, I guess you say they, them, or it means that person. Like it's a non-gendered word.
So I understand about, you were mentioning about, around 17, that sort of time frame, recognizing like your sexuality, your Two-Spirit aspect of yourself. But for your gender identity, when did you start questioning that maybe being gender non-binary, calling yourself they, them, felt more you?
Yeah, that was something that I was thinking of for a long time. I remember being a kid, being very little, and I would pick flowers on the side of the road, which is not a boy thing. Apparently, you're supposed to do, and I would be told by parents or adults or whoever was around, boys don't do this.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So there was a lot, or they don't play with Barbies or My Little Ponies. And this, but then being very clear, like a boy does this, boys do baseball and this or this or this. And it's like some of those things I enjoy, but not all of them. But I don't understand. I never did understand what exactly they're trying to particularly impress upon me, but I knew some actions were not good and some actions were bad. Then when I was eight or nine, my hair would be a bit longer sometimes, or occasionally it would be cut into a rat tail. But I would get teased and they'd say, oh, you're a girl or you want to be a girl. And then I think about that and like, well, what do girls do? And then to be told or see that and like, well, I don't really want to do that either. I don't really, or there are things that I like about that role and there are things I like about the other role, but I don't really fit in one or the other. And then when I was older, maybe 6 years ago or so, people were like, oh, there's a word for that. Like, what is this magical word? Non-binary. So I was like, oh, well, that makes a lot more sense. And then that also was under this umbrella of, to me, it's under this it's within the circle of part of being two-spirit. But it's a very odd phrase to say that I am a non-binary two-spirit person. Just because of the cognitive dissonance in the terms, but here I am.
Indeed. So, Brett, you are Indigenous, Mi'kmaq, I believe.
Mi'kmaq, yeah.
Queer, two-spirit, and gender non-binary. You are all of those things and more. How do you? That's me saying how I see you, but how do you see you? How would you describe Brett?
I just say I nina ulnu, right? I'm a person. I'm just a person. That's kind of how I always see myself, or how I've always. I love who I love. I like what I like. I do what I do. It's never to me. I mean, and when this is who you are, it's just who you are. How do you know things outside of that? And exactly. So there are words and labels and things that we use to speak about them. I find them useful for communication, but ultimately it's more about just being who you are and being happy about who you are and knowing that who you are can change and shift and grow throughout the years.
What's that? You're a filmmaker in Canada. You are part of the LGBT community. Are you finding that there are more and more filmmakers that are part of the community that you are coming across, maybe that you are collaborating with?
Yeah, I think that there is a more opening up to stories and to experiences. And I see that in front of the camera and behind the camera. Like there's more LGBTQ, more queer community filmmakers now behind the camera than there was when I started out, or at least that are visible and vocal and open about it. I'll say that because I think it's important that it's not that there were necessarily no queer people, but it perhaps wasn't so safe or supportive environment for people to be themselves. But I do see that there are more stories. There's more support in general, like the Inside Out LGBT Q Film Festival in Toronto. There's a couple of different film festivals there in Toronto, right? That are all either they're focused on the community or they have a like a, what do you call it? Like a program, like a films for queer voices. So I see that over the years has been growing as I've been making my films. And I remember making my first couple of films and having actors like walk away because they didn't like the content. They had to hold another guy's hand, or they thought I would change it for them in the moment. And darling, I will never do that.
So you had actors walk away, what, like while you were filming, or?
In auditions, or okay. I think only once did we get into filming, and then the actor said he was not comfortable and that I had to change the material, or he wasn't going to participate, and so I wouldn't change the material, so he didn't participate, so the movie never happened. But I would rather the movie not happen.
And were these actors, were they part of the community, or they were just straight actors that got the role?
They were just straight actors at the time. They just got the role because we put out a casting call. We had no money. Mm-hmm. So you kind of get who you get. Sometimes you get two people that show up. Mm-hmm. Or back then there'd be like two people and you got to choose between two people. Or there's only two roles and the two people have auditioned for both roles. Mm-hmm. You have found your leads.
Yeah.
Or occasionally, no, you haven't. You shut it down and you don't make the project, which is unfortunate. But, you know, there are times when it's just kind of, maybe I'm just a stubborn bitch. I don't know. Can I say that?
You just did.
Oh, well, there, I stand by it.
So you are part of TIFF at 2021 with this film, this queer film. How do you feel about that?
Oh, amazing. I'm very excited to share the film. We've been working so hard on it, and it's something that I've dreamed of for so long. The story's been with me for so long, and these characters. I will say the material that we have, the movie that we ended up with, it exceeds my vision of it, mm-hmm. That's extremely rewarding. And then to be sharing it at TIFF is just kind of like an extra cherry on top, or maybe 6 cherries or five, something like that.
So what is next for you and Wildhood?
Yeah, we have fingers crossed for some other festivals down the road, but one that we know for sure is the Atlantic Film Festival, the Atlantic Film Festival, Atlantic International, back in Halifax, so hometown. We're actually opening the festival there. We're the opening night gala. We can't have a huge party though because of COVID, which sucks, but still. That's super amazing because not only do I get to share it with all of the queer community there, but with the Mi'kmaq community as well, and the film community. Like, it's kind of like a triple hit. Just pull up a seat and some popcorn, and we're gonna look at this crazy thing that we did.
Mm-hmm. And when audiences see Wildhood, what would you like your audiences to come away with after seeing Wildhood?
Well, my hope is that they come away kind of looking around each other, looking at the land that they're on, and the indigenous people of that land, wherever they are, and being more open to hearing the stories, the teachings, to speaking with people, to being together with people. Really, that's what the whole film is about. There's families, there's lots of elements of family in this film, both the family that you're born into, the family that you're looking for, and the family that you make, that you create on your own. And we've been so isolated literally for so long that I think it's wonderful for people to be able to come together, either in person at a theater, or even at home around, someone's uncle's giant big screen TV somewhere, and just to be able to spend time together and be with each other and just listen to each other and talk. So I hope that it brings people together.
Well said, well done, well made. Brett Hannam, thank you for your time. Thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure.
For even more on Wildhood and its filmmaker, Brett Hannam, wildhoodmovie.com.
Hey, this is Rye Daisies, and you're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
And just like that, this little gay journey through Rainbow Country has come to an end. For the full 2-hour episode, just head over to marktara.com, where everything is connected, and hit the archives banner. To keep up to date with the show, make sure you follow me on socials at Mark Tara Music. The podcast is available on all major platforms, including audible.com. Finally, I want to take this time to thank you for taking your time to be with me. Remember, stay well, stay strong, and stay safe.